My name is Nicole Naditz. I am, oops, hold on, it's not wanting to do that. There we go. I have a very long title, but essentially what I do is support teaching and learning with technology for all grades and subjects. That's helping teachers understand how to use the technology tools they have available to support your students. Um, both academically, but also to create powerful learning experiences that will support them going forward, support your learners going forward. I also support the district's world languages program, so I facilitate our textbook adoptions for world languages, and I provide professional learning to our world language teachers throughout the district. So I am really glad you are here today. You will get these slides as well as information on how to reach out to me and other ways to get additional support later in this program. We are focusing this evening on actually our new license for student-facing generative artificial intelligence. So I will start with a very brief introduction to some of the kind of benefits and then challenges and risks of generative artificial intelligence or AI. But pretty quickly, I'm going to shift into helping you understand kind of how we got to this point where we're actually providing a tool that students might be able to use, and why we selected the tool we selected, and then giving you a chance to kind of see that tool and what it does and how it works. So, again, really glad you're here. This is being recorded, so this will be later on the Family and Community Engagement or FACE webpage. So that you can review this later, or even share it if you have other friends or family members who would be interested in seeing this information in our district. So we've been on this journey in San Juan Unified for quite a while, actually. I began researching generative AI as soon as I heard about ChatGPT in November of 2022. I began supporting staff with just understanding what generative AI is, the benefits or opportunities it might have, but also the accompanying challenges, limitations, and risks. That started in early 2023. And all of this time, as those supports have evolved since January 2023 to now and beyond, our focus is on several things. Student success and making sure we're promoting student success while still promoting student voice, their own voices, not just AI, obviously. Critical thinking, creative thinking, communication skills, collaboration skills, and so on. Equity and inclusion is at the root of everything we do. So you'll see how that fits into our choice to actually consider providing an AI tool. Employee supports so that our employees understand how to leverage AI productively, responsibly, and ethically to help them in the work that they do, which is never able to be accomplished within their school day. They are always working evenings, weekends, vacation times, and so on. So understanding how to leverage AI in an ethical and productive and responsible way to help actually get back some work-life balance, and then engagement and partnership. So like this opportunity here for me to hear from you as our families and cherished community members, and the insight that you have and are able to provide as the caregivers for your students who are our ultimate concern, as well as partnership with our staff groups, not just the teachers, but also staff that work in support roles throughout the district in a variety of ways, and so on. So we've been very intentional. That does not mean we've been perfect. No human is perfect, but we've been very intentional and careful and thoughtful about our work with AI. And that work did start with staff. So we've had quite a bit of experience supporting our staff with a rollout of a license for a tool designed for education that they can use to support them in their work. That we lived in and sat with and got better at for over a year before we began looking at anything possibly for students. So this is not in and of itself a foundational course in generative AI. That is one of my very favorite things to talk about. So I am very happy to have one of those as well, where if you're not even sure you ever want to use AI, but you'd like to better understand it, the good and the bad, again, Luis can help. We can schedule something where I can record something. And you'll see later at the end, I do have information on a public facing website for from the district, It's in very text-based form so that people can have it translated easily and so on. But I'm also more than willing to do a session where you can interact with me and ask questions. So this will be a very quick overview of some generative AI basics so that you get to hear more about Magic Student. So there are some considerable opportunities that generative AI makes possible with understanding and intentional, careful, productive, and ethical use. AI can generate drafts, like teachers are using it, for example, to generate drafts of lesson design, multiple types of activities that respond to the different needs their learners have. It can help draft correspondence. Some of you talked about that in your things where you said it's helping you with writing content that you need for work, for example. It is a drafting machine, but it should always be considered draft, not something that you type in a prompt to ask AI to write something for you, and then you just send it off to somebody. Um, Use of AI always needs to be human-centered. Humans drive the work. Humans start the work. The AI is just sitting there. It's not doing anything for you until you prompt it carefully and productively and ethically. And then once it has drafted something based on your prompt, you regain control. And it's really important that you do retake that control, resume your role as the actual intelligent person who can understand whether or not the AI drafted something that you actually wanted, how much you need to edit it, refine it. Do you want it to try to do a certain part of it over again, and so on. So it's a drafting machine, but I like to not avoid saying that it creates things for you or that it wrote for me and so on. No, no, no. Us as the humans, we have to retain control. We have to really understand our critical role in human-centered AI use in the education setting, but even outside of education, if you're trying to figure out how to do something, it can explain concepts in different ways. So sometimes when you're learning, the way a teacher might explain something, maybe it didn't work for you, but by going to a properly trained AI tool with a good prompt, you can actually have it explain it in a different way that might work better for you, like personalize it to things you're interested in, such as baseball or nature or musicals. It's also really good at providing step-by-step instructions for how to do a process or a procedure. Interestingly, often AI can't follow those instructions because it's not actually intelligent, as you'll see in a minute. It actually does translate better than Google Translate. And this is precisely because of how AI is trained. There are limitations or kind of issues, even with language use with AI, but in general, because it was trained by receiving all the content publicly available on the internet, and because that content included content from languages in many, many countries around the world, and all of those things, whether it was web pages, articles, scripts for films, music lyrics, poetry, literature, whatever it was in context and originally written for native speakers. So that is very different from how Google Translate was trained to provide translations. And it results in AI actually being able to provide translations that feel more natural and are usually quite a bit more accurate than Google Translate. And as I said, it can help brainstorm ideas. So it in and of itself is not creative. If you're not careful, you can look at something AI generated and say, "Ooh, that's very creative." No, it's just following a relatively simple set of instructions and using the training it received to produce what you asked for. But in and of itself, AI is not creative. Humans are creative. We have to keep practicing that creativity and ensure that we help our students continue to foster their creative skills so that they can bring those with them into their lives for their own goals and interests, as well as for roles they may have in the future. But AI can help draft lists or help brainstorm ideas if you're having writer's block, for example. It can even help push your thinking and ask you questions to help you think through what you're trying to do. It also can provide some supports for those with special needs. But on the flip side, there are also challenges and limitations, and some of them are parallel to the things I just said it's good at. For example, there are challenges with its translations. There are challenges with the supports it provides to everyone, including people with special needs. And it's critical that you, me, students who are using AI with or without us, there are students not, they're already using AI at home, need to understand these limitations and challenges because by understanding them, we're positioned to make better choices about whether to use AI at all. And if we are going to use it, how to use it well, how to prompt better, how to better evaluate what it does, knowing the kinds of things that might be interfering with it producing good content that is accurate, unbiased, and so on. So, some of those challenges include that, as I said, it's not intelligent. And it's really easy for people to get fooled into thinking that it's smart and thinking that it really knows things, and then resulting in kind of trusting it too much. And we don't want to see that happen. People must be really thoughtful when they're asking AI to draft content for them to really look carefully at all of that content, including images. Look at the backgrounds, look at what's on the walls, look at what the people look like. Are they diverse? Do they reflect our community? We want to be really thoughtful about both how we ask it to do things and then evaluating what it produces in response. It makes mistakes. It sounds very authoritative. And we don't want people feeling like it's smarter than they are and not taking the initiative to push back if it looks like something might be wrong or inaccurate. And it really is always just making things up. That's actually what it's trained to do. It's trained to make predictions about what you might want when you are prompting it to create something for you. It uses its training to look at what you've asked for, look at everything it received in its training, and make a prediction that says, okay, I'm fairly confident that this is what the user wants. And then it drafts that thing for you. But it's making it up. For one of the ways people can tell this quite often is if they ask it to write a summary of a book they've already read. So this is a test you can do yourself. It will make things up and be completely wrong. It doesn't actually know things. And this is a critical piece of information that we all need and that our students need. There are ethical concerns with using artificial intelligence. First of all, it's really important to be transparent about our use of AI. What tools did we use? How did those tools, how were they used to support the product that was ultimately created? And what role did I, as the human, play alongside the AI? So in this presentation, actually, I don't have any content that was drafted by AI, and I didn't include any images that were created by AI. But when I do, I actually make sure that either on the image itself or on a slide at the end of my presentation, I make a statement about how and when and where AI was used to support the work that I did on that presentation. We want to be sure that we support adults in our system to be ethical and transparent about their use, and also students to be ethical and transparent about their use of AI to support them. There are additional ethical concerns as well, just because of how it's trained. Earlier, I said one of the huge pieces in its training is that it received everything publicly available on the web. Nobody asked permission of people who wrote novels, screenplays, songs, poems, created, and created photographs and works of art. All of that was just taken in by these AI models, and nobody asked permission of those copyright holders of whether or not that material could be used for training. And because of the way AI works, everything it takes in its training can end up kind of being mashed up and reused in the stuff it generates and drafts. So you don't know for sure necessarily. It's not it We shouldn't assume that content that AI is drafting is 100% original, because it's not. It's really informed by bits and pieces of all the things that it's taken in its training, right? So that's another ethical concern. And finally, there is, of course, a concern about people using it unethically to actually cheat or plagiarize, ask AI to draft an entire essay for them, copy it, put it in a document, and turn it into their teacher or professor and claim that it was their own work, right? So there are a few different kinds of ethical concerns. We are already seeing early research that shows that when people overuse AI and use it when they did not need to, it can reduce the capacity for critical thinking, and it can actually reduce our creativity and our ability to be creative, whether it's with our words, with visuals, or whatever. So again, it becomes incredibly important to train people to Think about whether or not do you really need AI for this task? Because if not, and if you have the skill and the time and capacity to do the task, the answer is that we as humans should go ahead and do it ourselves and not just have AI do it if we have everything we need within us to do it. Bias is part of artificial intelligence, and it was never designed to be biased. Nobody at OpenAI who created ChatGPT or at Microsoft with Copilot or Google with Gemini said, "Hey, let's create a biased AI tool." That wasn't the goal. But what happened was in the way that AI is trained by taking in everything publicly available on the internet, for example, um, the people who train these models, especially at the beginning, didn't see this through to the logical conclusion, which is that everything publicly available on the web reflects human biases. Everything publicly available on the web is not the total sum knowledge in human existence in languages. It's not all of the languages. It's not everything humans know and understand and can do. It's not everybody's histories. Because if you think about it, when you look at what's publicly available on the web, the vast majority of it comes from the North American continent, Western Europe, and then parts of Asia, and then blips in Central and South America have a lot of content on the web, and sections in of the continent of Africa, and so on. That doesn't mean nothing happened in those places. All of those places, all around the world, including places that don't have a lot of internet access, have history that goes throughout time. All of those places have language and multiple languages that have existed throughout vast amounts of time. But some of those languages are not really even present on the internet. So their words, their cultural ways of being and phrasing are simply not represented in the content. So the AI can't use it to help inform what it generates. Similarly, people's histories, like the of whole civilizations, are not very well represented on the internet in many cases. And as a result, those people's contributions, their genius, their inventions, their ways of being and thinking, their stories, and so on, don't make up the training and therefore don't help inform the output. And so the output tends to reflect a lot of the ideas and thinking and ways of being of a fairly Western European, North American kind of way of being and thinking and understanding of the world and our place in it. In addition, so for languages, one of the things AI will do, and this is something I like to share with families, staff, students, is let's say, now I happen to speak French. French is spoken in many places around the world, just like Spanish is, and several other languages like Arabic, and so on. And these languages have language varieties, ways in which, while it's French, there are things that are different in Senegal, in Tahiti, in Martinique than they are in France, right? And that's also true for Spanish, Spain, Mexico, Guatemala, Venezuela, and so on. There are things that are the same, but there are things that are different. Because of how AI is trained, what happens to some users is you can interact with AI in your home language. You don't have to use English, right? And so they're interacting in Spanish, for example, and maybe they speak Spanish, but they're from Venezuela. And the AI might say something like, "Ooh, I think you meant to use this word for Spanish, for sandwich, like torta, I believe. I speak French, but I think torta is the word in Spain for Spanish. I think you made a mistake and you meant to say torta. That's how you say sandwich in Spain. But it isn't how you say sandwich all over the Spanish speaking world. And because AI sounds very knowledgeable, right? And people don't always realize that it doesn't know everything and it's not actually intelligent and it's just making stuff up. It doesn't occur to them to push back. But what one should do when it makes a mistake, you must push back. So you tell it, no, I am from Venezuela. This is how we say sandwich in Venezuela. Please remember that. And it won't change it for everybody. But the more you interact with a tool that you're signed in on, and all of them require you to sign in. So the more you interact with that tool, the better it gets to understand what you want and the kind of content you want it to produce. And it will remember those kinds of requests for you specifically. So it's important to share that message and let other people know too that they don't just have to take the AI at face value and wonder if their own language is good enough, because it definitely is. Instead, when the AI tries to tell them that they have to use other words, they should push back and tell the AI why. No, this is how it is said in my place. There's also huge environmental impact with using AI, and it's it comes in two forms. The first one is the fact that every time we ask AI to do something for us and it drafts that content, that requires more energy than writing the content ourselves in Microsoft Word or a Google Doc. And it requires more energy than asking Google. It is important to note that AI and Google search are not the same thing, though. Google search is a different kind of task, but still, asking AI to do something requires more energy than electricity, for example, than doing it ourselves. And sometimes by quite a lot. The more in-depth the task we're asking it to do, the more energy it requires. um, the more analysis it needs to do, the more energy it requires. If you're doing image generation, that requires a lot of energy, but the more sophisticated the model for image generation, the more energy it requires. But there's a second layer of environmental impact as well, and that comes from the data farms and the server farms that power these AI machines, and they have to be cooled off. They, of course, consume an inordinate amount of energy themselves just to run, but they also have to be kept at a standard temperature. That's pretty cool. And some of them use electricity to do that, and others of them use pure, clean water. It cannot be recycled. So, in communities that live near data centers and server farms, sometimes find that they're experiencing brownouts because the electrical grid is prioritizing that AI server farm over the residents nearby. Or they sometimes find that there's issues with water access because it's prioritizing the server farm, which is using clean water to cool the server over the residential neighborhood nearby. And unfortunately, by and large, these server farms are placed more frequently near neighborhoods that are already lower income, already more prone to experiencing higher pollution because they are nearer to other industrial zones. So they're perpetuating some of that systemic bias that does occur already in our society. And I have to hope that over time, research will be done that will make it require far less energy and far less water to do what it does now. Similar to how the very first computers took up an entire room, then it took up a whole table, then it took up a desk. Then it was something you could put on your lap like a laptop. Then it was a phone I can do almost everything on my phone that I can do on my computer. And now we even have computing capabilities on our watches. It just gets smaller and smaller. So I have to hope that the environmental impact over time will also reduce through research and development. Finally, the last challenge and limitations I always want us to be aware of is I'm calling it the echo chamber effect. Some of you have seen this in AI. If you prompt ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot to draft something for you. For example, I actually asked for an outline for a different presentation I'm doing. And I wanted some ideas for some additional activities to engage my participants beyond what I had already thought of. And what happens with ChatGPT and Copilot and Gemini is you prompt it for something, kind of meatier to produce, and it will say, "Oh, it's clear you've been thinking deeply about this project or about this topic, or this outline shows very some very solid thinking and deep knowledge." Essentially, it's encouraging you as the user. This was done on purpose. The people who develop these AI tools don't want you to give up on it or walk away feeling like it was too hard. And so it's trained to uplift you and to encourage you. And on the one hand, again, they didn't mean for this to be a bad thing. They thought that that would make it easier for people to use. But once again, they didn't see it through to the logical conclusion. And so, what also happens is when people actually propose content that promotes violence, that promotes self-harm, it also agrees with that and it uplifts that. So it's really critical that we teach adults and our students AI is not your friend. It is not a therapist. It is not a replacement for talking to a trusted adult, right? It doesn't know how to support you if you're struggling. And when it just agrees with you, that can actually do more harm than good. So it's really important, as I said earlier, that we understand the many things that AI is trained to do very well, but that alongside that, we understand its challenges and limitations and risks so that we can make better choices, again, about whether or not to use AI at all, how to prompt it, how to evaluate it, what to watch out for. So we're going to start getting into why we're providing generative AI to students. And the first thing I need to share with you is that it is not available to all grades. Right now, it is grades 2 and up, and it's not available to students on their own. In other words, it's really important for you to know there is nowhere for students to click and have AI. It's not like the tool I'm going to show you, that's not something they can go find and just use. So, yes, students may have opportunities to use generative AI, but not because they could go into, some of you have heard of the portal that students go into and they can, or Clever even, and they can click on tiles to access some of their curriculum materials and other things. There is nowhere for them to click to access this tool that we have purchased. It is only provided to them from their teachers, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We think one of the reasons we're doing this is in spite of the limitations, concerns, and challenges, we know that it is too late, probably, for society to crawl back AI and get rid of it. Um, Europe was actually a bit more ahead of the game. They saw the writing on the wall, they saw it coming, they started implementing regulations and so on. But when ChatGPT came out to the public in November of 2022, there weren't yet any regulations or oversight mechanisms or anything. It was just dependent on the company OpenAI itself having good oversight on itself initially. Things are changing now, but it's important to realize that the result is that our students will never know a life without AI, and many families are not positioned to teach their students about AI. What is it? How does it work? Why does it work the way it does? What does it do well? What does it not do as well? What is it just not trained to do as well? What do we need to watch out for? What do we look for? How do we prompt it well? But also, how do we help it double check its own work? How do we check its responses? How do we ensure we're being ethical? That's a lot to ask of families and so on. And so part of my work is training teachers and other staff in how to support students, even with just understanding AI without ever being on it if they don't want their students to use it, because they will never know a life without AI. And communities, businesses, industry are going to be counting on schools to provide this critical knowledge and these experiences. So I mentioned earlier that some students are already using AI. Many of you are caregivers and family members to younger students. The older the students get, the more likely it is that if they have access to internet outside of school, they have already been experimenting with AI. And I guarantee you, virtually none of them know any of the things we just talked about today. On top, but here's the interesting part. Research has shown that those, let's say high schoolers, some of the teachers immediately were like, of course they're using it. They're using it to plagiarize their essays and turn in fake essays. But research has shown that that's not the majority of use. The majority of use is students who have consistent access to internet. They were going to ChatGPT. They don't know why they shouldn't be on ChatGPT. And I will say that is not a tool they should be on. But they didn't know why. They're going to ChatGPT because they figured out how to get access or they're signed on with their parents' account or whatever. And they're literally asking for help. How do I do this problem? Provide me 5 practice problems for this thing we did in math because I was having trouble and I need more practice. Please explain this step by step. So they're getting help. And while they were getting help, they were also learning how to prompt. They were figuring it out. They didn't get support in how to do it, but they're figuring it out. What about the kids who don't have consistent access to internet outside of school? How are they building those skills? How are they having those experiences? How are they learning how to select the right tool for when they do need help, whether it's AI or not, and then use that tool in appropriate ways to get the support they need? Or to learn, for example, other kids are learning about how to create chatbots on their own, which is going to be a very marketable skill one day if they choose to use it that way. What about the kids who don't have consistent access to AI? When are they getting those opportunities to not just learn about AI, not even just to get academic support or language support, but to actually become innovators in the AI space? We saw that there is a need to ensure that There are opportunities for all of our students, whether they have AI, internet outside of school or not, to have a safe, vetted, controlled space where they can start learning with AI, learning about AI, and developing some of those future forward skills. Language supports, you'll see in a minute when I talk about this tool and why we selected it. We have students who need language support when they are newcomers who are in ELD classes to learn English, of course, but during the rest of the day, they're in other classes. They've just arrived. Right now, they can't yet share their ideas and their thinking or begin to understand some of the content that's being shared by their teachers and their peers without language support. A human interpreter is always best, but the number of students and the sheer number of languages at any given moment has made it impossible for us to have a human interpreter for every single student in every classroom at every moment when they need one. So, in those times when a student is not somewhere where they have a human interpreter, AI can provide really critical language support so that they can actually engage with the content, continue to build grade level content and skills in things like science and math and so on, and even share their ideas in their home language so that others can then have it translated into English and benefit from this, skill and knowledge that all of our students have. Just because they don't speak English, as we all know, doesn't mean they don't have knowledge and skills and creativity to share. We also know that a well-trained, educational, safe, vetted tool can provide specific academic supports to students, whether they need support breaking down a reading passage so that they can read about the same thing, but maybe have it put at a simpler reading level for them, for example. Breaking down instructions. Let's say in some cases it's hard when a teacher gives multi-step instructions in one long paragraph, so break it down into its parts and into smaller chunks. Providing supports with understanding a particular standard that they're working on in science, history, math, English, languages, and so on. And again, preparing for a future with AI because that's real and that's happening. And we really need opportunities for our students to start under developing the understandings that they need to have, but also the skills that they need to have. So, Magic Student is a second product by a company called Magic School. We purchased Magic School after piloting that for staff in 2023. We purchased it in we purchased it earlier, but it took effect in 2024, in early 2024, for staff to be able to get supports with the work that they're doing. And that purchase was accompanied with a rollout with trainings on foundational knowledge about AI as well for staff use, because this was not for students. This was for staff to get support potentially with lesson planning. If they're a teacher who just got changed to a new grade or a new subject this year or last year or the year before, they could use the standards unpacker tool to help unpack the new content standards that they're now responsible for, to help create multiple versions of activities, multiple explanations, and so on. Um, it is powered by generative AI, but one of the reasons that makes it better than just going to something like ChatGPT or Google or Copilot is that it runs on top of multiple AI platforms to process the requests that teachers were making and also to generate content. And so does Magic Student, the student version. That's actually better than relying on just one. So in the early days of AI, tools would come out for teachers, and someone would basically train a tool to do a very specific task for teachers, like lesson plan. And it would sit on top of ChatGPT. So it's essentially ChatGPT with extra training in lesson planning for teachers for K-12 education. That limits how much information it has to work with. But when you have it sitting on top of Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and others, it's actually better poised. It gets training in looking at the request it receives from the teacher or the student, in the case of Magic Student, and kind of forwarding that request through kind of the proper set of tools that are best positioned to answer it well for that student. Magic Student provides tools that help students learn about AI and also tools to help students learn with AI. So it's not designed to just be go into AI and do things. I actually set up the training so that I actually suggest that teachers teach students about AI first before they ever put them on Magic Student. And they can use Magic Student's tools to do that, or they can use the other resources that I've prepared or curated for them, or they can use a combination. This was vetted by teachers. I'll talk more about that in a minute. It has enhanced safety and security. They actually signed a California National Student Data Privacy Agreement before they ever even had a student tool. Our state standards for student data privacy and security are higher than the federal guidelines. Um, and everything that is generated or asked for within both Magic School for Staff and Magic Student stays in sanjuan.edu. That means it never goes out. It never goes outside of our district to become part of other people's work. And it never goes outside of our district to help train their future versions of Magic School or Magic Student. I saw a chat. Hold on one second. Yeah. Yes. Let me, if I don't come back to that question, George, make sure it comes back to me. Okay. Um, so yes, yes. Um, it is accessible. This was also a non-negotiable. So it had to have enhanced security and safety features in place. It also had to be accessible. It is one of only two tools um, out there that are student facing that has a full accessibility widget where people with special needs can change how the platform physically looks to them, how to navigate it, um, how much contrast it has, and other things to make it more successful and easy for them to use the platform if they have special needs. It also is one of only two student facing platforms out there that not only can type in all of our district's major languages or um, interpret content that was typed that's copied and pasted into it in those languages, but it also can read out loud in all of our major languages, and it can accept oral input, meaning students or staff talking to it rather than typing in all of our major languages. This is very important so that, hold on just one second. Sorry, hold on, where's my tools? Hold on. So it can actually speak out loud so that people who have not yet had a chance to become fully literate in their home language can still understand what it has drafted on their behalf by having it read out loud to them in their home languages. So that's both for accessibility needs. Some people just need a screen reader because of vision impairment, for example. Others need it because they haven't yet developed the skills necessary to read the text on the screen. This is one of only two tools that can do that in all of our major languages and more. And the teacher has full visibility. So when students go to ChatGPT, nobody can see what the student does unless the student chooses to share that with someone. Okay. If students are choosing to go to Copilot or Gemini, okay, I'll tell you right now, probably no high school students are going to Copilot because that's Microsoft, but they might go onto Google Gemini because they may have personal Gmail accounts. Nobody can see what they're doing. It is critical and one of our non-negotiables that our teachers have full insight and visibility into every single interaction students have. If the teacher wants to, they can read every single thread that every one of their students has in the tools. And it has moderation, meaning that the tool is trained to try to identify requests from students that are either attempting to circumvent the safety features and get Magic Student to do something it's not supposed to do, or is in some way inappropriate. And so to help teachers, the teachers can quickly see if Magic Student itself flagged any interactions. And sometimes it flags inappropriately, like a student might be doing research on teen drug use. Not that they're the ones using drugs, but it will flag that just to be sure and let the teacher decide what to do. The teacher also has full control. Students only get access to the tools from Magic Student that the teacher wants them to use at that time. Um, And so, like I said earlier, there's nowhere for students to go to just click and be like, wow, there's 35 some odd tools here for me to play with. That's not what's happening. It is and intentionally used by teachers. Sorry, I'm checking on my next chat. Um, if it's not properly managed, then students will not be properly trained and may grow up to be dependent and inactive. You bring up a great point, and that's why we'll be talking a little bit about the supports later, why we're being very careful and thoughtful about how we are supporting this rollout of Magic Student as well. Oops, there we go. So first we had to we vetted the tools that were available for students. Only two actually met all of our non-negotiables at a minimum. And then we went to pilot the two tools, much like we would do with textbook adoptions, where there's maybe two textbooks that the teachers have identified as being the most promising. So then we test those out in classes with students. The teachers try it out, the students try it out. We collect data. We did the same thing with artificial intelligence. We started piloting both tools that met our non-negotiables for safety and security, teacher visibility, language use and abilities, and accessibility for those with special needs. Early in the pilot, it became clear that even after the vetting we had done that showed that those tools met our non-negotiables, one of the tools just wouldn't work in our platform. And we did not persist with that one because it was wasting a lot of instructional time. The teachers and students tried really, really hard to test that other tool, and it just wouldn't work. It would not open pages. It was not effective. And that told us right away that that's not the kind of company or tool we want to do business with. We need something that is consistent, that works as promised, while meeting all of our non-negotiables. So we did the pilot, we continued it with Magic Student. During that pilot, it wasn't just teachers using Magic Student and surveys, although I did collect surveys from students. Surveys also went out to families in pilot classrooms in case the students had talked to the families about it, and the teachers completed surveys about their experiences with Magic Student. But we went a step further, and I actually went to classrooms and watched it in action with students. I looked over shoulders while students were interacting with Magic Student from grade 2 through high school. Looking at the different ways it was being used, looking at the different ways in which the students were kind of typing into it, what kinds of responses it gave back. And I collected all of that observational data and I shared that along with the survey data from the pilot teachers and their students with the teachers so that when it came time to have a meeting to decide whether or not the teachers thought it was something that was providing enough supports in a consistent and safe and secure way to recommend purchase, the teachers had all that data. They had my observation data, they had their own data, they had the student data, they had the family survey data as well. So they examined all of that data and came to the recommendation that it would be worth purchasing a license for 1 year to Magic Student for us to, we didn't want to buy a multi-year license because you almost never want to do that with technology when you're buying it new, because you do want to see, first of all, how it works in your system for real when it's fully used and deployed. But you also, with technology and especially with AI, it's changing very rapidly. So it may not ultimately be the best investment to purchase multiple years at once when it could happen that a different tool will provide even better supports with more security and so on down the road. Right now, there's still nothing that meets the bar of Magic Student that we look for. And so all of that was reviewed. And as I said, the recommendation of the teachers was to pursue purchasing a license for Magic Student for grades 2 and up. And as you might have noticed earlier, they're not using it every day. We don't have students on computers every day for um, ideally for any subject. We certainly don't have students on AI every day. They're only using it when teachers have created a space. It's called a room. And in that room, the teachers put the specific tools they want their students to use for a specific period of time. We do ask the teachers to turn those rooms off after school and on weekends out of equity concerns for those students who don't have access to internet outside of school. It also makes it a little bit easier for the teachers to continue to monitor because they have another tool they can use alongside while students are using Magic Student or any technology. They can use Go Guardian during the school day to see all the screens at once and kind of see what's happening with students and how they're interacting, if they got stuck, if it looks like they need extra help, and so on. So, as I alluded to, teachers design these experiences for their students. Teachers identify learning goals, a reason. Why is it that I'm providing this room and what tools am I putting in it on purpose? And sometimes they'll say, I'm providing this room because students are going to be working on a project, and I know that I have students who need some support tools. They need tools to help them with reading, they need tools to help them um, craft and develop their writing so that they can communicate their ideas in writing better. They need math support, whatever it is. Sometimes they're creating a room that's very precise. We are preparing for an upcoming math test. We're going to, the teacher can train a chat bot to help the student practice the material specifically for that test if they want to. Um, so there are all kinds of ways that teachers can depending on the learning goal that they have for their students, there are lots of ways teachers can provide tools in rooms for students. So once they've identified that learning goal, they move on to number two. They take a look at the available tools in Magic Student and they create student rooms and put the tools that they want in the room. But they don't have to stop there because in number three, you don't necessarily want to use the tool just the way it was created, kind of as a template. Teachers can customize every single tool if they want to very precisely align to the work their students have been doing, the materials their students have been using, the rubric that the teacher is using to grade the project, and so on. So they can customize, and the teachers can test the rooms they're creating before they release them to students. They get to see it as a student and make sure it's working. Then, once they're ready, they provide students with access to the rooms, usually via a link, either in Google Classroom or through a QR code. But that's the only way students see it. There's nowhere for them to go to click a button that says Magic Student and see all the tools. That's not something they can do. While students are using it, teachers continue to monitor and support throughout that process. So as I said, they obviously circulate around the room. They can look over kids' shoulders, answer students' questions, and so on. But they also can, if they choose to, open up another tool that teachers have access to called Go Guardian, where they can see a number of student screens at once to see kind of where they're at and how the work is going for them. So what kinds of things can students do in these student rooms? They can learn about AI. Like I said, there are ready to use tools in Magic Student that help teach about AI, as opposed to them asking for AI to generate things for them. Some of the tools included are a chatbot on AI literacy. There's a chatbot called Could I Use AI for that? And it kind of helps them think through like these both ethical questions, but also, is that a good use of AI in general, even if it's not an ethical concern? Like, is AI well trained to do that kind of thing? They also could, if the teacher puts it in a room, there's a quiz me specifically about best practices with AI. So there's a quiz me feature that's a quiz me that the teachers can customize for science or for history or English or math or whatever kinds of facts. But there's one that's pre-created for teaching students about AI to help students practice and remember what are the best practices for using AI. As students do start to use AI and get more proficient, there's a prompt writing assistant to help them understand how to craft good prompts. There's also one where they craft a prompt on their own, but the AI will help rate their prompt and give them feedback. Um, and as they become even more advanced, students can practice creating their own chatbots and testing them out to see if the instructions they gave, the training they provided, was enough for the chatbot to do the task that they want it to do. This is actually a really critical skill. It helps. I have other tools that start even easier than this that helps students see just how much data it takes and how much training it takes to train a machine, essentially, to do even a very simple task like sorting things into two categories. This helps students understand AI better. I also do these activities with adults. It helps them understand better, and that helps them understand why AI makes mistakes. When you see how much data is necessary, how much training is necessary, how much training support and resources you have to upload to a tool to really help it understand how to do the task you're asking it to do. The other kinds of things that students can do is actually get support. So one side of it, they could be learning about AI if that's what the teacher wants them to do, or they could be getting supports. For example, there are customized tutoring bots, study bots, and feedback tools, getting multiple explanations for a concept, getting step-by-step instructions, or helping break down a complex assignment into steps or chunks. Language support, as I mentioned earlier, chatbots to push their thinking through questioning. I really like this because some of you have alluded to this already. That's going to put the onus of thinking and doing the hard work back on students. It's just asking them questions to help push their thinking further. It's not doing the thinking for them. And I forgot to mention one of the things actually that you didn't hear me say. It is Magic Student is trained not to do the work for students. For example, when I was in a high school biology class, the students were getting ready to work on kind of a project of choice. They had been doing a unit on ecology, and I was looking over the shoulder of one young lady, and they had been given the open-ended chatbot, which is like ChatGPT, but in this safe and vetted place that is monitored and that has special training and education. That's the other piece to it. Everything in Magic School and Magic Student has received additional training and education extensively. And so the student said, "Hey, I'd like to focus my research on this topic. Can you please provide me with an outline of some key concepts? Not do the research for me, just can you provide me with an outline of some kind of key concepts that I need to be thinking about if I'm going to do this research?" And what Magic Student said was, "Yes, I can do that. But before I do, I need you to tell me everything you know about that topic," right? So it's trained to recognize, in that case, the student was asking a very legitimate question, and it still said, "I want you to tell me about what you know so I can help you better." But I've also gone in and looked at the data. I can go in and look at the rooms that teachers have created, and I can see what students are doing. And I look at some of the flagged responses to kind of see what's going on. And when students try to get it to write, instead of using the AI tool that the teacher provided to help them, they try to get it to do the work for them. It constantly and very consistently says, "I'm sorry, I'm not able to do that for you. I'm here, for example, to help provide writing feedback. So let's get back to the assignment. Can you go ahead and please put in here your, draft of da 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 da, whatever it was." So I've seen over and over and over again where students do, because this is them experimenting. They're like, "Well, let's see what I can do." So they've tried to get it to do the work for them, and it refuses every single time. I also want to point out another reason why we're doing AI with something like Magic Student that is vetted, it's secure, it's education trained, it doesn't do the work for students. Students are going to make mistakes. Students are going to still try, in some cases, to do things they should not be doing with the AI. That's one of the reasons it has the flagging that it can do for teachers. And in reality, the best place for students to make a mistake, for example, making a decision that wasn't a good decision, um, doing something that was unethical with AI or trying to get AI to do something, it's really now while they're in school where we can help, we can intervene, have a conversation, decide on consequences that are appropriate, but the harm goes no further than that. We want students to learn those lessons now while they're in K-12 education, not when they're in university and can get expelled, not when they're on the job and can get fired, right? We want to try to provide these vetted spaces where ideally we've trained them in what to do and what not to do, and they're going to make good choices. But students, being students whose brains are not fully developed, are also going to make bad choices sometimes. And this is the time to do that. If you're going to make bad choices, do it now while you're in K-12 education. And in the grand scheme of things, the consequences are something that you can overcome now and still have a successful and joyful, life. So, oops. So this one was from one room where teachers, as Jacqueline said, like the student was allowed to ask a question about a topic they were curious about. And the student happened to ask about how do you make eyeglasses for people with bad eyesight? Now, this was not something where the students were trying to like write an essay necessarily. It looks to me like this was a case where a teacher was allowing them to see about using AI to get information about something they personally have an interest in. And so it actually talks about the process of making glasses, and then this thread continued. And I didn't screenshot every piece of it, but I wanted you to see like this was one way where students ask for information about a topic. Then I got a different screenshot from a different classroom of a writing feedback tool. Now, I shared this one on purpose with you because what happened was it said to get started, copy and paste or upload your writing, and I'll give you feedback. And the teachers train these feedback tools. So they give it the rubric they're using that ultimately will be used to evaluate the writing when the student turns in the writing to the teacher. They'll tell it what standard they're going for. They'll tell it if there was any additional content that it was based on, like a novel or whatever. So the student pasted in their writing, um, and it was, I think, supposed to be, yeah, it was supposed to be a story and descriptive essay about their favorite place. But then the person pasted in all of this information, and the feedback tool said, "Well, thank you. I can see you have a story about hard work, but." It's not a descriptive essay. The assignment asks you to write a descriptive essay. What does it look like? What does it sound like in this place? It's supposed to be about your favorite place and why it's so special to you. So, could you share your descriptive essay? And the reason I shared this was because I wanted you to see how, when students turn to the tool to try to do something other than what was asked of them, it is trained to get them back to what they're supposed to be doing so that the tool can do the work it was trained to do, like to provide the feedback to help them make their writing even better in that case. So I'm going to stop my share here. Okay, when students first open Magic Student every single time, actually not just the first time, they see this screen. Use Magic School responsibly. And it reminds them of a few things. Your teacher can see everything you do. Okay. Math answers are not reliable. So, like I said earlier, AI is good at outlining the steps to a problem. It's not actually good at doing the problems. I don't have time to explain more about why today, but it's interesting as to why. Interacting with AI takes practice. Be clear and specific, right? And try again if it didn't work the way you hoped. And then lastly, and most importantly, that AI is a tool, not a replacement for your thinking. And then that goes down. Oh, sorry, that's not last. That can help assist you, but it's not the final version because that's the student's responsibility. Monitor for bias and accuracy. Always double check important information and don't include your personal details. Um, Magic School, as a matter of policy, actually scrubs or removes that information if students accidentally share it. And one of the reasons you want to be on a licensed version of a tool, so someone asked about protecting your own privacy. You will always have more data privacy if you are using the paid version or a licensed version than you have if you're using the free version. There is no free version of Magic Student, by the way. That doesn't exist. But ChatGPT has a free version and a paid version. You're going to have more data security if you use the paid version than you do with the free version. But in the case of ChatGPT, even then, they're still going to use your content to train its model unless you buy a higher level license where it stays private. So we're going to be reminding students every time they come into Magic Student of these things, and they click that they acknowledge before they go. So I'm previewing as a student right now hold on, this is so big you can't see it. There we go. This is a step-by-step guide, and I gave it some simple training. I asked it when it gives support for step by step. Originally, when I tried it out, this tool was giving a specific example for every step. And it built that example over the course of all 10 steps so that by the end, there was essentially an essay for the Heroes Challenge, right? Where the students were supposed to write their own story showing that they understood the hero's journey. And so I went into the tool as the teacher and I trained it and I said, please don't provide a specific example. Um, and please offer questions to push the students' thinking. So I'd love to hear how you're thinking about building your story using these steps. What kind of hero are you imagining and what adventure might they go on? I am imagining, and I'm going to leave the typo because it can usually understand those, a female in a futuristic sci-fi universe. I like sci-fi that is in space. Okay, and that's all I'm going to say. And let's see what it does. So this is a real live demo. This could go horribly wrong. Let's see what it does. Oh, because it timed out. Hold on one second. Let me log back in. Choose your account. Hold on one second. It's going to probably make me go back in. All right. Let me go to my Magic Student. I'm going to go to my room. So you're seeing kind of the back end that teachers see. I'm going to go over to Manage Room. I'm going to go to the step-by-step room. Oops. This is the training side, where what I can do is I can give the task and then additional fields. I'm going to say, don't provide, I added this, don't provide examples at the end, invite the learner to share how they're thinking of building their story using the steps and then ask them questions. Okay. So I'm going to go back, save to room, and now we're going to preview as a student. And once again, it's going to open that screen. I'm going to acknowledge, and I'm going to say, I like sci-fi in space. I want a female lead. Okay. Oh, it's 7 o'clock. So I'm going to have to let us go. But notice how as the teacher, so the teacher's training of the tools is critically important. I removed the part of the tool that was giving an example of every step, and I replaced it with please ask the student questions to push their thinking, right? Now it's going to provide more detailed support. Um, my tool doesn't have any insights here because I don't have any students in it, but insights is where the teachers go for that learning progress, which is where they can actually associate a standard with a tool. And then it will actually provide that kind of data as well. But you can see that it ultimately is going to provide that. And it also provides students, and I can click on a student and I can look at their thread. I can see if anything was moderated, and I can do a lot more with this tool. So um, I want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to put these slides in the chat for you. You can see on slide 16, 3 different aspects about how we are supporting the rollout, and that is continuing to be